All right, recording is started, and this is the September 19th, 2024 Crossplane Community Meeting. I will go ahead and drop a link right now, as always, into the Zoom chat that will give you direct access into the agenda document. So check the Zoom chat if you want to find that. If you want to go ahead and add yourself as an attendee to the list here, feel free to do so as well. You're more than welcome to. And then the agenda is definitely open also. There's plenty of content on here, but we will have certainly time to talk about other stuff that y'all folks want to talk about. So go ahead and add some agenda suggestions if you want to. All right, so let's catch up. We do community meetings monthly now. I missed the last one. I think I was in Canada on a trip then, and Nick ran it for us. So thank you, Nick, for doing that and taking care of those responsibilities last time. So since the last community meeting that you all had, we got the 1.17 release out. So that's probably the biggest news since the last time we all met together. So all the release notes for everything that was included in that 1.17 release, and then a series of patches for the currently supported releases, the 1.16 and 1.15 releases, are all available here. I definitely did want to call out one particular mention here in the 1.17 release notes, is that we started a new program where we're doing a release MVP for each one of the major Crossplane releases. So in the very first release MVP for the 1.17 here, we selected Dalton Hill as the release MVP, and really we've talked about Dalton's contributions in this community meeting a number of times, so that's not anything new. You all folks should probably heard about that stuff, but I did want to recognize, acknowledge, and congratulate Dalton for the work that they did on basically enabling compositions to bubble up conditions and events and errors and stuff like that up to the claim level. So that's been some really good work, really good design. That feature is available now. And so for Dalton's effort during the release 1.17 release timeframe, Dalton is the MVP. So thanks a lot, Dalton. We did just last week, we did a series of patch releases for all the 3 most recent Crossplane releases that are still supported right now. Gosh, this was like just a couple days ago, I think, right? And I'm already forgetting what was in it. So let's take a look at those release notes, and I think they're mostly just some bug fixes. There was one regression. Yes, it was this one here. This was a regression that went out in 1.17 that we wanted to fix, and then we took a couple of other opportunistic fixes at the same time. So I just wanted to call this one out. And go to the original fix here, the original issue. So folks were in 1.17.0. Folks were not able to go to basically fall backwards to a previous composition revision because of a change to the way that we were marking that field as immutable. We had always been marking that field as immutable, quote unquote, for a long time. But then we took a pass through with a particular pull request to enforce those immutability guarantees. This one should not actually be immutable. Basically, when you go back to previous composition revision, you basically want to update that composition, the revision number to a previous number. When we marked it as immutable, that was no longer possible. So we went ahead and fixed that, got that out in a 1.17.1 patch release. And so that should no longer be a problem, that scenario of being able to roll back to previous composition revisions should now be working in 1.17.1 again. Previous versions like 1.15 and 1.16 are not affected because they did not have that regression in them. All right. So that's all the 1.17 or the most recent releases from Crossplane. There's nothing on my radar right now for another upcoming patch release of either runtime or core. So if there's something that needs to be updated there, we can figure that out. But I don't have anything on my radar right now for upcoming patch releases again. All right, so then moving on to 1.18, we are narrowing in here on the release dates. We have had as part of the schedule early November for a long time, right? That's what's in the release schedule, release table, etc. On the main README here. That looks like that we should hold pretty good to that. That's the plan right now. That does mean because we were a bit late with 1.17, that we have a bit of a shorter release cycle for 1.18 than the typical quarter 3 months thing, but this will get us back onto the routine schedule that we've always had planned. So a little bit of a shorter milestone, but expected to basically get the train back running on time again. I there is, there like this is I think a 1 week or so before KubeCon Salt Lake City. So it would be nice to, stick to the schedule, get that release out there, have, a new release, fresh hot release to talk about in Salt Lake City together, etc. So I expect this to probably hold fairly steady. Obviously, if there's extenuating circumstances or things that, severe issues that need to be fixed, then, we're always going to be a quality driven release over a date driven specifically. But this is the release date that we'll be working towards and expect to probably be hitting there. I have updated these links to the 1.18 roadmap, the 1.18 release board, etc., for all the plans in 1.18 timeframe. These are the high-level roadmap features here. That might be a little small. So high-level features here, and some of these are a bit opportunistic as well as you get down further into the bottom of the column here, but we'll talk about those. So we're gonna be, I think of the main theme, I think to focus on or to think about for 1.18 here is going to be maturity. So we'll be focusing on, investing in maturing some of these APIs that have been sitting in alpha for quite a while. So we do expect the usage API to be moving to beta. We do expect to make some movements with composition environments, environment configs. That's been a long time coming. So there's a specific agenda item later on to talk a little bit more about that. So we'll dive into that more at that time. But that's an investment that's been a long time coming, right? And then we are making a pretty heavy investment in the package manager. So you'll see a lot of activity going on now in the package manager to make it more reliable, to be able to do more advanced things like installing, instead of version tags, installing specific digests as well, to take that approach too. The handling dependencies, there's been some rough patches with handling dependencies, especially around the family providers, right, that have dependencies baked in there. So you'll see some improvements with that as well. So I'm particularly excited about all that work as well as Guy's driving. And then in 1.17, we released in the runtime the ability to support change logs, have a kind of an auditable log of all changes being made to your managed resources and your cloud providers. And so during 1.18, we're going to be rolling that out across the provider ecosystem as well. There's not been an official release of providers that fully support that. It's only in runtime right now. So we'll be spending time to get that into the most popular providers in the upjet framework and stuff. We'll be able to have all that features, functionality baked into it. NS, our wonderful Linux Foundation mentee for the summer term. That summer term has ended. We talked about that, I think, last community meeting, but he'll be wrapping up a couple more things in the validate functionality of the Crossplane CLI to kind of keep maturing that and then hopefully getting that to GA functionality as well. So more maturity there. And then these two here are more opportunistic. I think that these will really help the community as well as our release process too. So I would love for us to find time to move forward the contributor experience and the contributor story that makes it more easy for folks to get involved and be helping out in the project. We've seen tons of new contributors continuing to come and seeing people driving PRs and stuff like that, and it's been amazing. But there's still some more work to do to make that easier and make that more sustainable. So I would love for us to find time to do that, but we don't have an assignee on that right now to be driving it. So that's more opportunistic. And then each time we do a release, this one really does kind of irk me a bit. The end-to-end test functionality is not as stable and reliable as we want it to be, and it makes it more difficult for us to have confidence that the releases we're putting out are at a high enough quality level. So this one's still bothering me. It is scoped. There is certainly a subset of tests that are more flaky, but as you go further back in time with the older releases, it gets worse. So putting out like a 1.15 patch release or 1.16 patch release, I did we had to do some extra work to verify it and make sure that it was okay because we could not rely on some of those E2E tests. So that would be amazing for someone to step up and be able to drive that and get us to, having reliable, consistently green E2E tests that, don't have false positives. That would be really helpful for quality, but we do not have an owner for that right now. All right. We do have some super helpful links as well here for P0, P1 issues in 1.18, all of our P0, P1 issues. So, good first issues. So there's still plenty of contributing, content here for folks if they're kind of wondering what to get involved in. There's some links there that are specific for, the next few months that should be valid and useful stuff to invest in. So folks can find those there if they're interested in those.
I have a quick question, Jared.
Yes, Blake.
On the 118 roadmap, it's still the promote management policies to GA is still technically tagged as a 118 timeline, but it doesn't show in the roadmap. So I don't, based on what you're saying, I don't think you're planning on trying to get that into 118, but at least the issue is still tagged for 118 from what I saw.
Oh, okay.
Or on
Yeah,
the
good,
one.
good. Good question. There we go. I was trying to click as well.
Yeah.
And then so you're saying what the heck?
If
Is
you
this
look,
happening? 0.
yeah, if you look at the issue I just put in chat,
Oh, okay, in the chat. Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
that'll be maybe easier.
yeah, because you can see it's still tagged to the milestone of version 118, but
Yeah, okay, yeah, good point. Yeah, so I think that in the overall roadmap project, it's a TBD, but yeah, it's still got that milestone. So yeah, that's a good point, Blake, that I should that's a mismatch there that should get updated. Yeah, there isn't currently someone taking that on in the 1.18 timeframe, so that would be more accurate to remove that milestone. You're right.
okay.
Yeah, thanks for flagging that. All right. Okay. So I want to move on to providers now. Is anybody here on the call that wants to take the provider section? I know. Oh, actually, before we do that, Philippe and Bob, let me check in with you two on 1.18 stuff, or other things on roadmap and horizon that you all as maintainers wanted to potentially bring up before we move on to providers.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one thing that I would love to get into 118 related to being able to provide variable function input. Right now, function inputs are pretty static. Some functions have implemented a way of passing in a field reference instead of a value. But that is highly dependent, that has to be implemented in every function. It's not a generic capability. And I've got an issue open. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. Basically, describes a couple different possibilities in terms of ways to dynamically pass inputs into functions. Let me find that link and I'll paste it. And if folks could provide some input on that, I'd be interested in, getting other opinions. I have talked to Nick about it. We talked at the last composition function calls about it. And
were you finding were you finding that kind of alignment and consensus in your discussions with Nick so far, Bob?
It's still kind of early. I mean, he recognizes the need for sure. He is interested in avoiding more patch and transform like syntax, which I can't argue with. So it's kind of a balance between, what exactly there's two possibilities of implementations in there right now. The first one was basically adding, instead of input, you add an additional input refs with field, and Crossplane would then go process those field, process those field references and substitute the values in. Another possibility would be to use the context to, write into the context from a previous step in the pipeline with the variable inputs that you wanted for the subsequent function call, which I agree sounds a little bit like magic, but it's, not too bad magic, I don't think. So anyway, I would love to have folks input. I'd love to get this into 1.18. I don't know if that's reasonable, but I'm kind of in desperate need of that functionality. So
Would it be, I guess maybe as another easier alternative, would it be easy to add that as a like core functionality in like the SDK? So that way, if you want to at least go implement it in a function, it's fairly easy to do instead of trying to update maybe Crossplane core or Crossplane runtime.
yeah, I mean that would certainly be a step, a stepping stone or
Yeah.
a way to facilitate it. The thing that just concerns me is you're still dependent on the function itself
Yeah.
to be updated with that functionality, right? And I'd really love to have Crossplane provide a way to, provide that functionality without needing to go update every composition function to support it.
Well, yeah, thanks for driving it so far, Bob, and coming up with some designs and discussing them and such. So yeah, so this issue here, 5906, I went ahead and added an agenda item for it as well, and feedback and thoughts from everybody who wants to read it and kind of get share your opinions on it is more than welcome on that issue. Then cool. Thanks for bringing that up, Bob.
Nothing to add to what you already put into the roadmap on my side.
Cool, Philippe. Then you just be ready for later on in the agenda items about environment, config's composition environment. All right. So let's move to providers then. One like the recent provider updates that I think is probably the one I can think of I most want to call out right away is server-side apply was alpha support for server-side apply was added to provider Kubernetes and released just a couple days ago, I think. And the reason I think that's is important is just take a look at the number of long-standing issues that this fixes. Obviously it's an alpha support, you got to enable it. There's it hasn't been, baked for months, obviously either, but this is a really nice addition to provider Kubernetes, which is a rather helpful utility provider that a lot of folks do use. It's got pretty heavy adoption and it fixes a number of reliability issues of the ilk that server-side apply typically fixes. So a lot of longstanding issues there were resolved by that. Take a look. I think it's the 0.15 release. Yes, 0.15 release has that, and let us know what you all see with that. I think that was a pretty important release and a lot of work from both Hassan, I think Erhan as well. Spent a lot of time on that and heavy reviews from Stefan as well. So that was really good effort from a lot of people there to get that one fixed. A number of the typical upjet providers as well are out in the last week or so. And thank you. I don't know if it was Fatih or if it was Jim who added the specific details about all of them, but thank you for adding that to the agenda doc so that it's here for everybody as well. All right. Cool. Any other providers that folks want to bring up here? More than welcome to leave it as a suggestion to the doc as well so that it's included. All right. So let's move on to the community topics here. We got a few of those to get through. So content stuff. We always have a little collection of content from cool talks and stuff that everyone blog posts and everything that people are doing in the ecosystem. One of them that I wanted to call out specifically, not just because it was mine, but I thought it was particularly compelling, was that the lovely folks at Equinix had a demo day. And it was pretty cool because it was focused on IAC infrastructure as code stuff. And so there were, folks from Terraform, from Pulumi, and others. It was really cool. And then obviously the Equinix folks were sharing some cool stuff too. But this was an interesting talk about the different spectrum of Crossplane ways to implement things in Crossplane, managed resources, composition, functions, and higher level languages, and then full on, general purpose programming languages that functions enable. I thought it was a particularly interesting demo that kind of shares a lot of perspectives on how to do things with Crossplane. It's a bit of a preview as well for the talk that Max, Mr. MX and I are going to be doing in Salt Lake City at Platform Engineering Day. So check that out if you want to. A lot of folks on the call here probably know this material, but I thought it was particularly interesting and, feel free to check it out. Yeah, and there's lots of other good talks too. Yuri and Steven had a really interesting talk about testing that they did in at the KubeCon in Hong Kong. So that's another really interesting talk to check out too. All right, so KubeCon coming up. There's a number of talks about Crossplane. So I've included search results here for both the main KubeCon events and then also the co-located events as well. I think there's like 3 talks about Crossplane at Platform Engineering Day. And then there's 2 at ArgoCon as well. So definitely some good content that we got into from a number of people into the co-located events. And then we, of course, have some other talks as well in the main KubeCon lineup too. We were talking before the recording started about Blake taking the lightning tour, the lightning talk there that is going to be particularly impactful, I think, because of the number of people that show up to those. The ones at the last KubeCon, I think that room had like 1,000 people in it or something. It was pretty gnarly with the amount of reach and scope you get from this talk. So Blake is going to kill it on that one, and a lot of people are going to hear the good word of Crossplane directly from the Gospel of Blake. So it's going to be pretty sweet. Oh, actually, and then so I have myself on the intro and deep dive, like the typical maintainer talk that we get. Thank you, CNCF. I was looking for a co-speaker for that, and I didn't get any bites on it. So if there are folks heavily involved in Crossplane that are looking to take some of that intro deep dive material there, the offer is still out there. So just ping me directly if you want to talk about co-speaking on that one. I don't know when deadlines are for changing speakers, but I don't think we've hit that deadline yet. So feel free to reach out and we can talk about that. All right. Excited to see folks in Salt Lake City. I don't know much about Salt Lake City, but I'm excited to go check it out and hang out with you people. Should be fun. Okay. So Jean and his team drove something that was way overdue, and that was entirely my fault because I said I would do this maybe 2 years ago and I did not get around to it. So thank you, Jean and team, for taking the initiative to update the core Crossplane repo and the Crossplane runtime repo to change the default branch from master to main. That's a more inclusive decision there, and that was long overdue to happen. So thank you for taking the initiative to do that. There's a link here that goes to the announcement in Slack about that for the minor steps if you have forks or if you have like a locally cloned these repos. There's a couple steps you can take to change the default to main, your default branch to main as well. If you go to those repos in GitHub, GitHub does a really good job of popping up something for you that tells you these instructions too. So you probably have already seen that if you have a fork of Crossplane that you're maintaining as well. All right. Quick announcement and then a question as well. So Bob, this question's going to be for you, so get ready. But yesterday, Nick went ahead, I think it was yesterday, maybe 2 days ago. This week, Nick went ahead and did a bit of an overdue the SDK, the Go SDK for functions. Nick did a release of that, the 0.3 release, which has some features that have been sitting there for a bit. So the exciting feature that we were talking about that Dalton did in 1.17 for being able to bubble up status and events and stuff like that to claims. Support in the SDK is available for that now. Clément's contribution to add support for credentials and functions is in that release as well. So you can kind of tell a little bit how overdue that release was. That's out there now. And then, of course, the major change of maturing functions to V1, support in the SDK has been updated there as well. So we need to now, I think, take another step to update the template repo that, folks creating a new function from scratch, can kind of start with there. That needs to be updated to use this new version of the SDK, use the V1 types for composition and all that. So I think that should be done pretty soon as well. That should be a fast follow. And then Bob, question for you. I saw that function SDK Python already had a 0.3 release. But that didn't include the V1. I don't actually even know how stuff works in Python, Bob. So what needs to be done for this? Anything? I don't know anything about Python, man.
I'll have to go back and look. I don't remember whether the proto buffs were regenerated for V1 or not. I thought Nick did those both at the same time, but I could be wrong. So yeah, I'll have to go back and look.
Okay, cool. Yep, that would be awesome to check that out since you're quite active there, and appreciate your work on all of that stuff. But yeah, if we need to do a release of Python, and it's we have to sync up with Nick too to see if like maybe he's already doing that also. If it's something needed to be done, I did not check with Nick on that, so we can ask him on that one too. But yeah, having an updated SDK for Python as well would also be very good. All right. So let's move on to the next topic here about the future of environment configs, composition environments, all that sort of stuff. So there's a draft PR up for this here, which proposes to remove the native support for environment configs. There's been a bunch of discussion on it as well with Philippe and Bob and such. Philippe, can you please catch us up on this, like where we're at with this, where folks are aligning on, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, sure. So the main point is the main open discussion is whether to drop the supporting compositions for loading environment configs and like all the things that now you can do with functions. And given that compositions, we promoted functions to V1, so now compositions can probably be deprecated at some point, the native patch and transform composition. And so environment config as a resource will continue to exist. There is no intention to drop that, but the part in the composition regarding what was at spec environment now will be either dropped or deprecated. That's the open discussion we're having. So given that it was an alpha feature, Nick is supporting the point of it was an alpha feature, so we can drop it. We know it was a really used alpha feature, so we are trying to discuss it and to understand if it's going to be a major pain for users or I mean, we have a way forward and a migration path pretty clear for those compositions and people using that feature, but still dropping the whole thing in one release could be a bit too aggressive. So we're trying to understand how to handle it.
And so, Philippe, is this pull request the best place for feedback to be added in here? Like this is where the discussion is happening right
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
Okay.
Either that or the issue link to it. So
The 3770?
yeah, I think it's the promotion. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I know environment configs was something fairly heavily used. I guess maybe just so I understand a little bit more, the environment section in a composition resource would no longer be available at all.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the proposal right now. Because it comes with a lot of code and a lot of complexity that given that compositions V1 is probably going to stay like this for a while. The point is we would rather avoid having to support all that code for the time being. But yeah, it's still to be discussed.
I wonder if there's because I can at least say from my perspective, like the fact that it's not just a flattened essentially like key value store and you can actually nest things, I think is one of the big values of using that over something like a config map and then pulling it in through extra resources. So I wonder if there's maybe a way you can keep the actual API, but
Oh,
instead of
yeah. We
grabbing
are
it.
keeping the API. There is function environment config that you can actually, it's replicating almost the 99% of the same behavior and API. There is the link there in the PR. It's actually just doing the same thing with the same configuration pushed down to a function. So
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the type isn't going anywhere. The environment config type will still be there. It's just that environment section within the legacy patch and transform composition implementation.
exactly.
Because you can set an environment in a composition that's using composition functions.
Yes.
So that would also, Yeah, okay.
In the context. That's what function environment config is doing. It's using extra resources, the function we introduced a while back for functions, and retrieving all the environment configs you specified, merging them all into a context and passing them down to the next function. So other functions could actually re-implement the same thing if they want, but we felt it was more useful to have it like composable and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense what you just said.
And Philippe, is this a good, like what I have highlighted on the screen right now? Is
Yeah,
this a good
yeah.
example of like what it looks like to use, function environment configs to select, filter, extract, whatever an environment config type that's not going away at all?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Would there be plans to promote the actual API itself to V1 beta 1, at least promoting that to beta if we're going to remove? Okay, sorry, missed
Yeah,
that.
look, it looks like it, Blake. Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
Yep,
went through my
yep.
mind.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, so as Philippe mentioned, and thanks for describing and explaining this, Philippe, and for folks participating in the conversation. So yeah, there is opportunity to continue talking about this. So the link in the agenda doc is right here. That links to the pull request where it's being actively discussed, and links the historical issue that's been tracking this as well. Looks like that one's more than a year and a half old. Nice. Yep, it's a long time coming. And thanks everybody for listening and discussing and, kind of trying to find a great solution together. I think that's something that's really nice in this community. I really do appreciate that. Okay, so I just wanted to make a kind of a quick announcement and kind of an opinion here. So if folks that are contributors to the Crossplane docs, you have certainly seen the Veil tool that does automatic checking on writing style and passive voice and spelling and all that sort of stuff. That has been a bit of a pain for us, mostly because we had a non-clean code base. There were 674 errors by the Veil tool. And so if a contributor would come by and make a fix, every single, if you changed a file, all the other pre-existing errors in that file would be shown to you at the same time and fail your PR. So this was a bit intrusive to folks that wanted to make a small change, and they would see that there's like 70 errors from this Veil tool in the file that they're trying to edit, which is not a great contributor experience. So we spent some time to go ahead and fix all of the Veil errors that exist in the Crossplane docs. So at the error level, we are back down to a clean 0 slate again, which is really nice place to be. So going forward, Veil can still be tough. It does have some somewhat aggressive checks. But I think kind of the policy here that we'd want to use as maintainers of the Crossplane docs is to make judgment calls on these stuff. So I think at the error level, like words that are like completely misspelled and stuff like that, we will hold that line of we're not gonna let those errors get in. Now that we're to 0, we do not want to introduce new errors. But Veil also has a number of warnings and suggestions, and we did not fix all of those. So those still exist in the code base. And a warning or suggestion is something that we won't hold a pull request against. We won't block a pull request being merged just because it has warnings or suggestions. So we want to continue enabling contributions to the docs. We want to make it an environment in which people could be successful there. So it's just kind of a shout out or announcements for the maintainers of we're clean in the docs again. That's a great spot to be. Let's hold that line for errors, but warnings and suggestions. Let's find a balance between enforcement of rules and contributor experience and inclusivity. Cool. That felt really good to get rid of those errors as well. That was a bit of a slaying the beast type of thing that had been over our heads for a long time. Jean added this to the agenda doc, but I don't think he's here today. So let me bring this one up. Let's see. I think there was a new comment from Jean here. All right, so let's look at this together real quick. This is all about how can we have more people involved, say like releasing the Crossplane patch releases and minor releases and stuff. We have done a number of work items since this issue was originally opened a couple years back. So we've got a roadmap, we've got project boards, we've got the release cycle documented, we have template issues for how to run releases, all that sort of stuff. So I think that Jean is making a point here that we are now in a sufficient place where folks that are not maintainers could run a crossplane release with the right support. So I think that we could basically say, I don't know if we need to establish, like a formal release manager program, like to that level of formality and detail, but the door is open and there's an invitation out for folks want to get involved in running and managing one of the releases for Crossplane, that we have that capability now. So I guess that's to the folks in this meeting here. If anybody wants to run a release, just feel free to ping me for that, and we can get your name down on the next release as the release manager, and then you can go through that process and get a Crossplane release out to the community. Were there any other thoughts on that? Because Jean had added this, and I'm just kind of going through it in real time. Any other thoughts on that? All right. Cool. Yep, just let me know if anybody wants to release Crossplane one day. And Blake, you added this one here about management policy stuff?
Yeah, so I kind of threw it out in the chat as well, but although management policies going GA isn't part of the 118 roadmap, I know there's several issues we've seen specifically in a lot of the upjet providers with management policies, and the way management policies are working with init providers. For example, I think I called out one issue a couple of weeks ago surrounding async resources in upjet, where if you try and use an init provider with async resources, if the provider pod goes away, whether it terminates naturally, if you delete it, whatever, it will essentially remove all the information about external name and stuff, because you can't have late initialize with essentially if you remove late initialize with async resources, it essentially gets into really weird states. So I would be interested if we could spend a little bit of time in 118, the 118 release window or development window, to spend some time thinking about what are some of the big issues with management policies, and see if there's ways we can work around that. I know one of the other things I called out in that issue is in Upjet, there's also a lot of issues with async reconciliation with the Crossplane runtime. And I think my advocation would be, if we're having problems like we can't essentially use a init provider with async resources in Upjet, we probably can't do management policies at a GA level. So I just was trying to call it, like, I think it would be very valuable to spend maybe a little bit of time this release cycle thinking about what are the high priority items here, and is there work we can do to make when we want to do a promotion of management policies to GA much easier.
Yeah, good point, Blake. My first question for you would be, do you already in your head have a good idea of issues in this list and ones that are high priority for you? For instance, is this the one you opened here, the pod restart one? That's the one you opened, right?
Yeah, that's the one I believe I opened.
And it's at the bottom of the list, I think, just by, when it gets added, it goes to the bottom of the list. Is that an example of one that you think is much higher priority in your opinion?
I would think that would be one that I would say, or at least a bug that I don't think we would want to call management policies GA if it was still around.
Right. Yeah, are there other ones that you think are pretty important, like just off the top of your head that you would certainly call out?
I think the second issue there, the after external resources created changes to a init provider shouldn't take effects, is probably another kind of important one that I would think about. I think there's also some other issues like removing immutable fields from a init provider, which I think would be fairly important, especially when we don't support replacement yet in Crossplane runtime. You don't support replacing a resource once it's already been created, or like an in-place replacement or in-place replacement. And so some of those things I was thinking about, I think are would help overall and not necessarily need, get us to GA, but would make us, so we want to get to GA much, faster.
Yep. Yep. That makes sense. Yeah, I'm just kind of scanning through these as well too. Wait, was this one of the ones you were calling out too, Blake? This 384?
Yeah, 384
Okay.
was
That's the one. Okay. There we go. I'm on another screen where I'm actually logged in and can make edits on this. Okay, sweet. So I kind of just reordered a little bit there with some of the ones you were calling out. Let me follow up, Blake, to
Sure.
check in with some of the other maintainers there that would maybe be able to contribute to that and see if there's something that could be done in the 1.18 timeframe too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And thanks for bringing that up. All right, sweet. So that's everything that was in the agenda doc. Are there other items that folks want to bring up before we adjourn here? Walt, looks like you raised your hand. Very polite of you.
Yeah. So here at the top, if you scroll, I'm not sure if my comment will be there. Yeah. No, it wasn't. Okay. So further, maybe not. So on the list of the links at the very, very top, you had the GitHub link.
Very
I just
up
made
here?
here
Here we go.
So I made
Yep.
a quick suggestion to consider putting the actual contrib link there too. So a second link to the GitHub and then that will affect the actual contributions to the marketplace and things like that, because you had mentioned that throughout this meeting. So that was it. Just a little suggestion. Not sure if that's of interest, but figured I'd throw it in. That was all.
Yeah. That sounds great, actually. Yeah, that's the Crossplane contrib, like organization has a ton of useful projects that are in use across the entire ecosystem, both providers and functions and stuff. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to have that be a discoverable link as well. Totally, 100%.
Okay, that was all.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Walt. Appreciate it. Good to see you again, man.
You got it. And by the way, for those who haven't seen it, Jared's demo day link that he threw there on the bottom there. I'm not sure which bullet point. Oh yeah, there it is, where his cursor is, was absolutely fantastic. So he actually split it up into 4 separate sections, and each section got more complex and closer to the actual like abstractions of what like Crossplane does. So yeah, it takes you from like sort of like from like the history of like computing, sort of. So it's actually pretty fascinating. But it was an absolutely fantastic demo.
Right on, Walt. Yeah, definitely appreciate your enthusiasm, man. And it was really cool. Like, really grateful to Equinix to put that event together and to have us there as a as a presenter too. So that was pretty rad experience. I really enjoyed the team there.
Yeah.
Sweet. Cool. All right. So yeah, I think that's everything. Another successful community meeting together, everybody. Thanks for everyone's attendance. And we'll keep working on the 1.18 milestone here, working towards early November 5th-ish timeframe before we get to Salt Lake City to get another release out. Lots of stuff to build, lots of stuff to focus on. So yeah, thanks everybody. Great to see everybody today. Yeah.